It is my honor and privilege to welcome Holly Moore to the stage. Come on.
Got this feeling inside my bones.
Thanks, buddy.
It goes
Appreciate
electric
it.
wavy when I turn it on.
Glad to see everybody today. It's been an amazing day. I've been taking tons of notes, right? There's incredible speakers. I have been traveling for work for probably about 25 years or so. And how many of you have rented a rental car recently? Anybody? Okay. So you know the drill. You travel somewhere, you get to your car. My goal is how fast can I get off the plane, into the rental car, and to my location? Well, I landed a couple of months ago in Tulsa, Oklahoma, went to the rental car, got the key, sat down, shut the door, and I was completely stuck. I could not figure out how to turn the car on or get it in drive. And I was looking around and I'm thinking, are people watching me? I will tell y'all, I had to get in the glove box and get out the owner's manual and look through and try to figure out how to turn that car on. I think that sometimes we feel that way when we get into communication and getting into talking. Have you ever gotten into a conversation at work and you're like, I thought I knew what this meeting was about. I thought I knew how to show up. I thought I knew the decision that we were going to make. And you get in and you're kind of looking around and you're thinking, what is going on in this room? Here's the problem. Team members talk all the time, but it is an art to know if we actually communicate with each other. I'm often called to go into organizations, I was telling Valerie this before, that they want to do strategic planning, but I spend a little time with the team and I'm thinking, how will you ever do strategic planning? You all can't even talk honestly with each other. They can't do it. I love this quote by Charles Kettering. Some of you may have heard of him. He was the director of research at General Motors back in the 30s and 40s. And he's credited with saying this: a problem well defined is half solved. Think about that. A problem well defined is half solved. So today, here's the problem over the next few minutes that I'd like for us to try to solve together. Here's the problem, is unmet expectations. What I have realized is if you go into a work setting on your team, at your house negotiating with your teenage daughter, or if any of you are like me and have a crazy HOA in your neighborhood, the root issue is often an unmet expectation. And it happens every day. In fact, I bet you all are going to leave here, go back to work, and at some point by the end of the day, you're going to have some kind of conversation where there's a misalignment of expectations. What you wanted, what you thought they wanted. Here's what I have realized happens with unmet expectations. The first thing you feel is you feel disappointed. Maybe you hired someone, they showed up really well in the interview, their references were incredible, and then they show up at work and they've been working with the team for a couple of weeks and you're just thinking, that didn't turn out the way I thought it would, or they haven't acclimated to our team, or they're not working as fast as I would have wanted them to, and we feel disappointment. If the disappointment does not get resolved, you all, it turns into bitterness. And the cold, hard truth is there are teams every single day that the boss actually has bitterness towards someone that reports to them, and employees have bitterness toward their boss. We might not ever speak about it, we might not acknowledge it, but it is happening. If the bitterness does not get resolved, then I think one of two things can happen. Has anybody ever seen where a relationship that you knew of professionally or personally, that bitterness actually turned into contempt? I was consulting with a company a couple of years ago, and there were two very senior leaders that had just their relationship had just been fraught with a lot of issues. And I was brought in to try to talk and see, could they somehow find a way to work with each other? And the thing that I noticed at the end of that conversation that I told the CEO of that company is, this person actually has contempt for this other person, and it's almost impossible to come back from it. But the other thing that can happen that I see all the time is maybe we haven't gotten to that stage of contempt, but I like to describe it this way. There are teams and organizations that function like the solar system. It's like I'm looking at Cooper that I know well. So it's like Cooper and I are both working in an organization together, but we're not really seeing things eye to eye. There were some unmet expectations, and I've just kind of given up that it's ever going to be better. So it's Cooper and I are working for the same company, but I'm kind of like, I'm Venus. How about you be Pluto? We're all still in the same solar system at work, but I have completely given up any hope whatsoever of us actually having a trusting relationship where we can collaborate together. So if the root of all of these issues is unmet expectations, then the antidote is to try to clarify expectations. Do any of these sound familiar? Here's some areas where unmet expectations can show up at work. Have you ever had a situation for yourself or someone else, there was just a complete lack of role clarity? I thought you were doing that. I thought you had the authority to make that decision, and people just don't know. Or who's making the decision? Do you make the decision? What decisions need to have approval? Or what's my path for career advancement? Do I actually have a future here? What's my next step? How will I be able to do that? People who either avoid or mismanage conflict, right? There has been some type of unmet expectation, but because people can't talk about it, this conflict is just stirring underneath all the time. Or have you just noticed on the team or in a pocket of your company that there's just low morale? I want to challenge you today that it could be that root issue is there is a history of an unmet expectation. So the antidote to an unmet expectation is we need to get brilliant at setting and managing expectations, right? It seems simple, but sometimes we don't do the very practical things that we can do to actually be successful at that. So I want to give you a couple of tips today so that what we expect and what our reality, instead of those being in complete opposite of each other, how do we get those aligned? So here's a couple of tips. The first thing is to remember that communication is always a two-way process, and especially for those of you that are leaders here in the room, you're a people leader. I always tell people, regardless of what your job title is, if people report to you, you're a people leader first. And have y'all ever heard the saying, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason? That is because we have got to listen, 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 listen. One of the sayings that I will often tell myself and others is, when something's not going well, when I've got an unmet expectation, I want that to be the trigger for me to get curious. And I'm just wondering what would happen in our teams if we said, I'm going to choose to get curious rather than be easily offended. I want you to think about it. What would happen if you said, I'm going to get curious rather than easily offended? What's that other person thinking? What data were they looking at? How did they come to that decision? Can we listen and hear that other perspective? My favorite definition actually of empathy is I stand in another person's shoes long enough to understand their perspective, feel what they feel, and be able to reflect that feeling back to them. That does not mean I agree with it, they're going to get their own way, but I can be empathic towards them. The next is to clarify the type of the conversation you're having. Have you ever gone to a meeting and you thought, oh, we're going to collaborate on this event that we're planning, and in actuality, somebody in that room is like, well, no, actually, I'm going to give you a critique, and your mind's not even ready for it. So I love to coach leaders to say, before you go into a meeting, you can take your window, your wedge that Juliet talked to you about, and go, what kind of conversation are we going to have? Is this a collaborative conversation? Is this a critique conversation? Are we celebrating a milestone? And then let's talk about what kind of decision is going to be made. Is this a command decision because things are so serious? Or is this a collaborative decision? Is this, I'm consulting with you about a decision I'm going to make? Clarify the type of conversation you're having and the decision to be made, and then have a proactive bias against assuming. Here's what I want to leave you with. Y'all, nobody can meet your secret expectation. Nobody's got Superman x-ray vision. They cannot meet your secret expectation. We've got to state our intention. And I'll close this way. Years ago, I got to travel to Egypt. I had been in country for a number of years, a number of days, felt like years, a number of days. It had been amazing. I loved the people. I loved the food. But I'd been there for about a week. And y'all, I just wanted some McDonald's. I wanted a quarter pounder, French fries, and a Coke. And outside of McDonald's, they had come in and they had built an amazing McDonald's. The McDonald's looked like something you'd see here in Alpharetta, a beautiful paved parking lot. However, we were on a highway. We needed to get to the off-ramp to go to the McDonald's, and they just hadn't paved the off-ramp. Okay, so I want you to think about it. You're driving on a highway. I know there's a McDonald's, there's a quarter pounder in my future, but to get from the highway to that McDonald's, I was feeling like I'm in an off-road experience. You all, we do that to our teams all the time. You know what you're thinking. You know where you're going. You know the kind of conversation you want to have. You know the expectations maybe that you want of a certain person, the decision you're going to make. But to be with you feels like I don't know where I'm going and you have taken me off road. We have to clearly state our intentions, and if we do, if we will make it our goal when we walk out of this room today, I'm going to get great at setting and managing expectations, I think the health of your relationships will change forever. Thank you.
Move like Jagger, I've got them moves.